So Ananya, Place is a collection of essays spanning 13 cities and 25 years. And my first question to you before even getting into the book is, why did you choose this cover photo? Like, by this particular picture, is there any story behind it?
Yes, actually. So that cover picture is of a street in Istanbul,
Yeah.
and it's in a part of Istanbul. Um, well, a very big part called Beyoğlu, but a small neighborhood called Cihangir, Galata, Tom Tom. I mean, these are the three neighborhoods which are kind of intersecting. And this is the street that I always have to go up and down when I'm in Istanbul in order to get to public transport or in order to get back where I'm staying. And the photo is taken at dawn or daybreak by a very dear friend of mine who is Dutch, and he's a photographer. His name is Wim Klerks, and he actually appears in the book on numerous occasions. He's an old friend of about, 25 years, something like that. And coincidentally or in a planned way, we've often traveled or met up in the same places. So we've actually been in Bangalore, in Bombay, in Amsterdam, in London, and in Istanbul, and in Venice, actually, together, and also in France, where his wife is from. So we've also in Antwerp, now that I think of it, also in Ghent.
A lot of places.
So on this occasion, actually, when he was taking this picture, he was in Istanbul on his own. I mean, I wasn't there, and his wife wasn't there. No, none of us was there. He was just spending a kind of time out from his job and returning to photography. This is quite recent, in the last year or two. And so when we started planning this book, then I said, look, we have to use one of your pictures. And he had in fact made an album for me as a sort of gift, and this was one of the pictures in it. And so so he sent us 3 or 4, and I chose this one because I liked the fact that it was so familiar to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It definitely makes sense. Like, she appears in the book quite a few times.
Yeah.
You really speak of him very highly, and how he has been a great friend of yours since, like, I think you started even traveling, and even since before that.
Yeah. I mean, we met by accident, but then we became friends, and we've done a bit of work together in the past. He actually stopped being a professional photojournalist some years ago, and went into his other areas of expertise. I mean, he writes code. He's a very accomplished computer guy, but he's slowly coming back to photography, and this trip to Istanbul was sort of one of his attempts to return to an earlier self, in a sense, reconnect with his photographic journey, in a way. Yeah.
Interesting. Like, on that note, I would also want to ask you a question regarding, like, the people who are mentioned in your book. Like, you mentioned Wim. There are a few people who appear quite a few times.
Yeah.
You talk about Agamben, you talk about your father quite a lot.
Yeah.
You talk about Samuel Beckett.
Yeah.
So I think this is a book also about, like, people.
Yeah.
So it can be like places and people.
Yeah.
So do you want to, like, say something else about it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, places are really defined by people in many ways, or, um, they become meaningful to me because of the people who I meet there, or who live there, or who have written about it, or who have sort of made that place what it is, and this could be well-known people, or it could be just my friends, just people that I meet in the course of my life. They could be historical characters, writers, artists, architects, rulers. I mean, they could be sort of uh, famous in the historical sense as well. It need not be somebody that I've directly been in touch with. But I think that, cities or places for me are always mediated by human understanding, and by human intervention, and by human perspectives. Um, so it's difficult to simply write, as though it doesn't matter who's there, or what stayed with me in terms of my encounters with other people. And some of them, you mentioned, are a part of my life, actually, like Ashish Nandi, who's also there throughout the book. My parents, both my mother and my father, they keep recurring through the book. Or my photographer friend Wim, who also turns up quite a few times. And others, my friends, my colleagues, and then sometimes people that I actually reach out to in order to sort of meet them or interview them, or people who I've read, authors, very often intellectuals of various kinds. So that's a big part of how I experience and how I understand a place, is the people in it. And I don't mean sort of the general public, but often quite specific encounters that I've had, or relationships that I continue to have, over the long term.
Yes, like you mentioned, it forms your private mood map. Private mood map as comparison to in comparison to like the geographical entity that a city forms, and how both of them interact with each other. And maybe sometimes maybe what you're feeling in a city like Delhi, you might feel closer to that in a city which is very far off, like New York.
Mm-hmm.
But you might not feel similar to like that in like the neighboring cities. Like, do you form connections like that, threads like that?
Yeah, in fact, with Delhi, there's two essays on Delhi. And in one case, I've written about this Pakistani painter, Shazia Sikandar. And, I'm sort of describing meeting her and looking at her work and talking to her in Brooklyn, in New York. And then, jumping back to Delhi and to looking at Indo-Persian art, music, etc., other sorts of poetic traditions which are located in Delhi. So that's a huge arc in a sense. And it's also got some invisible places in it, like Lahore, where Shazia is from, or where she studied miniature painting in the first place. And similarly, in the other Delhi essay, I start off in Vancouver, where I, met this well-known writer, and we were talking about my mother's recent demise, and the fact that I had inherited my parents' house and I didn't know what to do with the house or with its contents. And then it comes back to Delhi. And then even when it's in Delhi, then I'm kind of zigzagging back and forth between this campaign that some of us were involved with to save Lachin's Delhi and the Central Vista, versus present day Delhi, which has all sorts of urban problems. So there's a it's not cities in isolation, but cities that are peopled by these characters, and also cities that are connected to one another across time and space, and that have similarities, like Venice and Banaras. In my mind, they're kind of similar in a strange sense. Yeah.
Even like you were speaking about Latin Delhi, and you wanted to you want to preserve it, and you want to preserve this part of like this is a beautiful city, and how can you manage to preserve that? On that note, like, do you think the architecture of a city, especially I think you mentioned 3 monuments which are very close to you: Humayun's Tomb, Sanghi's Mosque, San Giorgio's Church. All of these are on different continents, and how you look at them as forming this Indo-Persian sublime. So this architecture of a place, in your all throughout your essays, how do you approach that? Like, how do you read the grammar of a city?
Actually, architecture is very important for me, and I love to go and look at, old buildings and famous monuments. So whatever, palaces, forts, museums, gardens, whatever urban elements that, or religious, sites, mosques, synagogues, churches, temples, whatever is known about that place, historical monuments, you could say. Delhi is full of tombs and sort of memorials, and also the Red Fort and things like that. The whole of the Nizamuddin area. I mean, Delhi is completely packed with historical monuments. But I also like looking at relatively recent and modern architecture. And there's a lot of colonial architecture in places like Bombay and Calcutta. There's a lot of colonial historical sites, in places like Lucknow and Kanpur and Calcutta and Madras. And in Delhi, because the late colonial capital was built here only starting in the early 1900s, you have what is known as Lachin's Delhi, and then after independence, it becomes a kind of Nehruvian period of modernist architecture and so on.
Right.
In Bombay, if you see, there's a lot of Art Deco buildings. Yeah. And in Calcutta, it's a sort of slightly earlier colonial, because, Calcutta was the earlier seat of the East India Company and the British Raj before they moved to Delhi. If you go up to Shimla also, you see, that was the summer capital of the British for quite a long time. So there's a lot of, if you go to a place like Ahmedabad, it had so many architects who were from there, and they were, or Chandigarh, they were really part of this kind of modernist movement in that Nehruvian phase of Indian architecture. I mean, the question is not whether you like it or not. I mean, that's not as relevant to me. Although obviously there are some things I like more, and that's why I describe Jihangir's mosque in Istanbul, and I described San Giorgio's church in Venice, and Humayun's tomb in Delhi. I'm just using them as kind of pegs, in a sense, to trace my journeys between these points, or between the cities in which these monuments are housed. So in that instance, it's Delhi, Istanbul, and Venice, know. But I mean, there are many such places that I know well, And I know also through walking. So that's a very important part of this book, in New York, for instance, or in Amsterdam, I'm just walking and walking, and in Istanbul and walking and walking. And that's how I know not just the famous streets, but I also know neighborhoods. I also know, the different social, historical, economic, cultural, parts of a city which kind of come together in a particular way. Because many of these cities have a medieval or an ancient and a contemporary fabric, which is kind of woven with all these threads of different historical periods. And by walking and by looking at even ordinary homes or factories or shops or any kind of building, any kind of sort of place where people live. In Bombay, that's very, very interesting because it's so mixed and it's so complicated and there's so much going on. Also very old, colonial port city in India. And it has all these different communities, right? So there's a Gujarati Bombay and a Maharashtrian Bombay and a Bollywood Bombay and a Christian and Muslim Bombay and a a financial Bombay, and there's all these different cities which are also architecturally visible.
Yes,
as such.
Even Pune to some extent, if you just walk around the lanes and you see these houses, which have been preserved for quite a long time.
Yes, I've lived in Pune also for my research for quite long periods of time, and I used to know Pune very well. I don't anymore because I think there's been a lot of new construction and highways and flyovers and things which I didn't, which weren't there 25 years ago. But I used to know Pune very well as well, and some of that was from walking, some of that was from driving myself within the city and around it and outside into Maharashtra. And some of it was from, again, particular institutions that I had to visit. So libraries, archives, research centers, the homes of scholars, universities, I mean, obviously I have a particular range of things that I'm interested in. But those often took me, especially because I was at the time working with both Marathi and Sanskrit materials, and also looking at, Ambedkarite politics and things like that. So it took me into very different neighborhoods than just the kind of, English speaking, upper middle class, elite enclave.
Sort of gated society. Different than this city where you walk around.
Yeah, you can go into the old city, you can go into the cantonment. There's so much of the Pune University, and there's so many institutions, educational institutions on whose campuses there's a certain kind of like architecture, but there's also, their own history of when they were set up in the early 20th century or something like that. And and for me, I mean, I wasn't just in Pune, let's say, to read certain kinds of texts in Marathi or Sanskrit or whatever, or to work with certain scholars, but actually being embedded in a sense and living in that physical space, that architectural and urban space, with all of its complexities and difficulties. I mean, that to me was very helpful as a, even as a somebody trying to write a historical dissertation. I needed to understand the milieu, the three-dimensional milieu, but also in time. So, 4 dimensions, and not just, go and go to a classroom and sit and read and then close the book and leave.
Right. So, a lot of questions based on this, but first I'd like to ask, you wrote a chapter on Pune, an essay on Pune called The Archivist. and it's like very different from the other essays in the book. That's it's a
Third
piece of
person.
fiction.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
So what was that? Why that choice? Why did you decide to include it? And the undertone of that essay is very like the depth. You feel that tension in the air. You feel that you mentioned his tongue feeling that acidic, that metallic thing when he wakes up, and you know it's coming. And there is he rides around the city, and you're mentioning everything surrounding the city. And I've been to Pune, so I know where you're mentioning all these areas as well. So why did that choice in these set of essays? And the time that you were writing it, you also mentioned in the book that I think you showed it to Ramchandra Guha, and he didn't like it at all.
Well, so 2 or 3 things were happening. One is that at the time that I was writing, let's say, that particular essay, I was both contemplating, a career or a future as a writer. So I was also trying out different things, writing travel pieces, writing opinion pieces, writing short stories, little pieces of fiction, just as a kind of trial and error, in terms of what genre I was comfortable in, because I'm trained to write academically, right? And the kind of writing you would read in my dissertation or in any of my term papers or my pieces of research, or even my earlier book, is in a completely different register, and that is kind of almost like a technical skill that you learn, to write in that particular way, and writing for scholarship and writing for writing, or for reportage or for journalism, or these are all different things. So one was that I was in a phase of experimentation, and I actually wrote a lot of short stories around 2000, 2001, 2002, up to right into 2004-5. I wrote a bunch of short stories, and I did at one point try to show them to to people I looked up to, like Ram Guha, because at the time I was also spending a lot of time in Bangalore. And eventually he did connect me with some of his friends, who you probably heard of, like Mukul Keshavan, and Kai Freezer, and others I met in Bangalore, Achal Prabhala, and then of course Ruko Nadwani, the publisher, and Dilip Simian, who's a social scientist but has also written a memoir. I mean, these were all people, who were sort of historians / public intellectuals, and they were interested in the literary, or magazine editors, journal editors. So Civil Lines, the Pune story was published. The Archivist was first published in this journal called Civil Lines, which at the time Mukul Keshwan and Kai Freezer were editing, and they ran it for a few years. It was kind of based on the idea of Granta, but it was for Indian writing, about India or South Asian writing in general. And it was published there. I had also given them another story, which was set in Paris, and they accepted that, but I withdrew it later. So that brings me to the second thing, which is that why fiction,
Yeah.
See, because at that time, I was writing about people I knew in real life and things that happened in real life or adjacent to real life, slightly imaginary, but also set in real context, in real time, in a sense. And I didn't always feel at liberty to reveal people's identities, or to use their stories as fodder for my fiction, which I was doing, but I didn't feel free to do that as non-fiction, right? I mean, in fiction you can take certain liberties, but if you use proper names and you refer to real people in a very kind of straightforward way, then that involves a whole different set of issues of permissions, of what you can say, what you can't say, what you don't want to reveal, what you want to hold back, etc. So that's why I withdrew my other story, because that was even though it was set as fiction, it was about somebody that actually I didn't want to compromise, you could say, in any way, or talk about in a public piece of writing. So yeah, I mean, even though the character in this archivist Neera, I mean, it's a third person, but it is me in almost, I mean, every detail. It is me. The archivist is imaginary. He's a composite character made from various real people I knew, but there's no such person who actually died in the archives. In my time there. But I felt that to say various things about Pune, I needed to have a fiction of fiction, you could say. Now that I'm older and I'm removed in time from many of those experiences, I may want to handle it differently, and I may be able to handle it differently. But as a I was just in my late 20s at the time, and I was just starting to write, and I didn't want to get in any trouble. I mean, that was A, I wanted to get published, and B, I didn't want to get in trouble. And I also was unclear about the boundaries between my academic life and my creative life, which I was trying to cultivate on the side. And so that contributed to the, and when I when my editor and publisher for this book, Ritu Menon, this book was her idea, and she wanted me to show her everything that I had written over time that had to do with cities and travel. So I also showed her the fictional pieces. I showed her that Paris piece. She didn't accept it. I showed her the Pune piece. She said it has to go into the book. There's another thing called the American Triptych, which is written as, it's unclear as to the terrain on which it is set. It's in first person, but it's still, told as these kind of shocking stories, of people's lives. And again, it's a very unclear terrain between fiction and non-fiction. So she was fine with that, and I ended up writing actually about half the essays I wrote afresh for her. They're not published before. And then some pieces I'd written earlier but were not published. They were just sitting in my diaries or my drawer. And then the ones which I acknowledged in the back, I mean, those were published before. Yeah. So in a way, fiction, I mean, it's a very long answer, but in a way, it was both a question of trying to figure out style. I don't know. I mean, at that time, I was even trying to write a novel, which still remains somewhere in the back of my head as a possibility, So fiction and non-fiction, academic and general interest, I mean, these were all trial and error, issues for me, and I wasn't necessarily always equally confident in fiction as I was with other things which I was more trained and habituated to writing. Well, as a scholar,
Interesting. You also mentioned that when you were in Pune, you were roaming around, you were walking a lot in different cities as well, in Istanbul and Venice. Most of your I would say intimate encounters is intimate because you've been walking around the cities and actually living there. So I wanted to know, like, as a woman, like when you approach city, it's very different from how men would do, how much access they would have. And I'm pretty sure you also have had your fair share of how you approach certain parts of the cities and with caution, and certain parts with like more excitement because you had that access. So I would want to like explore that more, like how as a woman, intimate encounter with the city would be very different from maybe, and how also across geographies it would differ. Maybe what you couldn't do in Delhi, you are able to do in New York or Venice. So if you could
correct. That's correct. I mean, that's actually a very sharp question. I'm surprised that nobody has asked me this so far. That, this is all very much, in my skin, in my body, that I'm in my, not just in my head, but also in my sort of being a woman, that I'm navigating all of this, right? And you would think that it's I'm just as much of a traveler or a flaneur or whatever, an observer, or an inhabitant as a man might be in my place. But you're right. I mean, there are all kinds of issues of safety, of risk, of mistakes that you make sometimes. What happens if you get lost? Sometimes you don't understand the language, and you might get into the sort of wrong company or be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, I would say that Istanbul or Venice or New York or Amsterdam or Bombay, I feel very safe in. Pune, generally in Maharashtra, South India, one feels sort of vastly better. Actually Delhi, even though I'm from Delhi, there are just certain parts of Delhi I would never go. There are certain times of night I would never venture out. There are, I'm not confident now, although I was as a younger person, driving in Delhi because it's so dangerous on the road, you know. And I've been in terrible car accidents, one time on the highway between Hyderabad and Bangalore, all kinds of things. I mean, I've missed flights. I've had very difficult like breakups or conflicts with friends or the end of relationships, etc. Places like Chicago or what have you. And it's so for me those places are not they're very fraught. They could be physically dangerous, but they could also be emotionally very fraught. And I would have difficulty sort of being comfortable there and letting myself be alone there, right? So one of the things that I have usually adopted as a strategy, often consciously, but often it just works out that way, is that I always try to get in touch with people I know. I also get a lot of advice from people who know these places and specifically might go and see things because they told me to, and they're off the beaten track. They're not in your guidebook. You only know if you know. And I usually have that kind of thing on me, information on me. But I also, I make an effort to meet up with people and to do a lot of my walking with friends, with locals, with experts, you could say, in a way, not tourist guides, but really people for whom that city is home, right? And then with them I travel, in areas that they know well, through experiences that they, in a sense, mediate or curate for me. I often stay with friends. At least I used to as a younger person when I couldn't afford to get a hotel, or when I was not being invited and put up, which is also often the case. When I was just traveling on my own money, in a sense. So I would just stay with friends, and then that would open many doors. It would clear many paths. It would make many slightly risky things doable. And yeah, I mean, it's always been a kind of patchwork of, avoiding what is egregiously, off limits. So I wouldn't say, like, I know this woman who's written a book about walking in Kabul as an Indian woman. And, I'm not sure I would do that. I just not sure that I have the, I have the wherewithal to do that. But she's done it, and she's written this wonderful book about it. I've also been to, like, Pakistan and Kashmir and Sri Lanka, and again, in highly protected spaces, literature festivals, World Social Forum, family, homes of friends. But, in a place like Kashmir, I wouldn't, even with all the knowledge, all the information, all the protection and the backing of family and friends, I would not just set off and travel on my own. Not because people are threatening, but the way in which the state is present there and the military is present there, it's so militarized, it's so fraught. I would just not do it. But again, others have. So I shouldn't, I shouldn't rule it out on account of my gender, certainly.
Interesting. Yeah, even when I have traveled around to different cities, like, the point is to increase the familiarity with the people with the places they might know, and maintaining at least that safe layer. Because at the end of the day, you don't know how people could be, or how maybe some areas in the city could be, like, dangerous for you at a certain time. So increasing that knowledge, like you said, you would, like, make sure that at least this is a good area for me, or this is not.
One thing I tell you, that you could get mugged or robbed, or worse. And anybody could, literally anywhere. That's one thing. But sometimes, you also feel a particular kind of danger, which is I don't know how else to describe it, political. Right? So, and I feel that, I felt that in Delhi many times, during protests, or if I'm at the university or JNU, or, and something is happening, or, I was in Shaheen Bagh or something like this, anything can happen. And people get beaten up, people get arrested, people get, all kinds of stuff has happened. It has happened to people I know, people I know well. My close friends, associates, colleagues, students. I mean, I know a lot of people who have put themselves, and a lot of them are women, right, in danger for a cause. Now, I was once in a college in Delhi University where, it broke into a kind of a lathi charge and a riot, and then, and I was speaking there, and I wrote an article about it, but I also, before things got very, very crazy, I happened to have my car in the parking lot. I just jumped in the car and I went back to my office, and I got out. My instinct was to stay there and watch what's happening, and then write about it in detail and take pictures. But I was advised to get out while I could. And I'm glad I did, because many of my colleagues were hurt in that instance,
Right.
So, yeah, sometimes, it could be bad luck, or you could be a different type of, like, my friend Nandini Sundar, or, more better known Arundhati Roy. I mean, if you're going into Bastar, you're going into the forests, you're going into the Narmada Valley while the movement is on and villages are getting submerged, you're traveling with Naxalites and things like this. I mean, that is a different level of courage. And I'm not sure that I'm there. That may not be for me.
No, I totally understand. Well, sometimes it's just you want to protect yourself instead of maybe like going there and being a hero or being that figure, and just want to.
I mean, I tell you, I want to live to tell the tale, right? I don't feel that I need to draw attention to myself, or that my doing that, making a hero or a martyr of myself, would necessarily even help the cause that I'm espousing, So I think writing serves a different function than a certain kind of activism.
Right.
And while I'm very interested and involved in many different sorts of, campaigns of a public nature, I'm not in it to lead them. Let's say that. I'm interested in the social and political process, and I want to be able to understand that, analyze that, and also talk about it with other people, present it to other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Related to that, Ananya, so in your book, Righteous Republic, there is that question which you are discovering of what is self, like in Swaraj, like the crisis of self, and our founding figures, all of them are trying to find their own answers by exploring the ancient India texts, maybe different Western books as well, and texts as well. In place, I saw in this book that you wrote, I saw that you explore cities as a sort of a landscape where you are figuring out maybe that self is at play. And I'm not maybe able to articulate it in a better way, but when you're in that book, like, you are finding the crisis of self. In this book, it's more about that crisis at play currently in these landscapes in the modern India. Do you see a thread there? Do you see this something which is could be related to from that work to this work?
Actually, somebody else also said that or wrote that in a review or something like this. And also, I think maybe asked me in one of my conversations, at one of these venues recently. Yes, I think I hadn't thought of it actually, but I think that's a valid response for a reader who's read both books. I mean, in Righteous Republic, I was, as I said right at the beginning of the book, interested in the Swa and Swaraj, right? The selfhood, the sense of collective identity, the quest for sovereignty, of a self that had to be constituted at that moment in time historically, through certain political historical processes, and under the kind of authorship, you could say, of those 5 characters and many others. But I chose the 5 through which to tell that story of that quest for the self, the Indian self, or the selfhood of India as a sovereign entity. And I suppose, I mean, it's correct to say that, it's very much a self, or many selves, who are traveling through these cities, or meeting and bumping into each other, or partying in these cities. Partying as in going their separate ways, not partying. Although sometimes they may be partying as well. I mean, I think couple of writers that I've been very influenced by, in the way that they write about places, including W.G. Sebald, this German writer who lived in England and wrote about the Holocaust, and Orhan Pamuk, who's of course a Turkish writer, lives in Istanbul, and has written a lot about modern Turkey and historical Turkey as well. I have sort of I think my experience of place is very much a function of the self who is walking through that place, or navigating that place, or encountering that place, or meeting others within that place, right?
Right.
But the search is a larger one, you could say, right? I mean, it is for something that is perduring, not just vanishing, right? Which could be, the spirit of that place, or the kind of political temperature of that place. It's kind of natural, the place where it settles, and where it would always be if it were not for, external events that were forcing wars or genocides, or exile or migrations, or for example, I mean, Istanbul has had different phases of its history, from Byzantium to Constantinople to Istanbul, and to modern day Turkey, in the Republic of Turkey, in that Istanbul. These are very, very, very different. The Ottomans had their own kind of notion of culture, and their own kind of cosmopolitanism. Kemal Ataturk was a modernist, but it also involved purging Turkey of the Armenians or the Greeks, or the Jews, all of whom used to live cheek by jowl, much like India, this kind of diversity and multiplicity of communities. So in a way, it's been also through some pretty terrible sorts of cleansing, in the last 100 years or so. And in that, to find the kind of thread, of continuity, of that persists, and that somehow embodies the essence of the place. In Banaras also, I mean, I think that is something that I'm really searching for, something that I'm completely unable to find in Bangalore. In Delhi, it's very much also tied up with my own life, my own selfhood. But in a way, much of this can also be seen as, although I don't prefer that as a mode, but I think it is inevitably going on that I'm trying to find myself as a writer, as a person, as a woman, as a mind, and trying to figure out, what my place is in the world, and to articulate my perspective through these different travels, you could speak. So it's a journey inwards as much as it's a journey out and about in the world.
You mentioned in the book that when you're out there exploring the different cities, or just living in different cities, you sort of mastered this art of listening. Like, it's more about understanding from people around you, from culture around you, than just, going there and giving your one-way communication. Instead, you want to listen more and understand more. Do you think in Bangalore, when there's this essay you wrote, Death of Sanskrit, that was missing, and maybe that's why you uh, didn't necessarily like this city that much, because it didn't have that history, that rich culture that you were looking for? Or maybe I'm just reading it wrong.
No, actually, I like Bangalore very much, which is, I know, I describe sort of feeling like a failure and being frustrated with my research and, not being able to handle this kind of clash of cultures in Bangalore, the new and the old. And actually, I listened a lot. I learned to understand Kannada. That's how much I was listening.
Yeah.
And I made many friends in the scientific community, in the literary community, in the scholarly community, who are still my friends. And I go there very often, and I'm quite comfortable in many ways. But at that stage, in both the life of Bangalore and the life of, Ananya Vajpeyi, I think there was something of a mismatch. And the purpose for which I was there, I could not realize in that city, which was trying to read these Sanskrit texts and think about caste and think about, social order in medieval India. That was not the right location for it, and it took me a long time to understand that, and I was constantly distracted by everything else that was going on, in terms of this IT boom and this kind of Silicon Valley of South India, and all the new initiatives, the new technologies, the new media, and the very clever people, who were coming in there at the time, but who are still there, many of them, and all the kind of, cutting edge discourse on the one hand, and the kind of increasing fracture between, the Kannadiga literary culture and social history, and this kind of IT boom. There were also personal issues. I was, not very happy personally. And that was kind of a lot of that personal unhappiness and interpersonal unhappiness I kind of projected onto the environment, and felt that I didn't belong. I was out of place. I was I was somehow not, I hadn't found what I was looking for, in the end, it's not clear that, it's, you don't find things out there. You have to make them.
Yeah.
It's not like, I went to Banaras and I found it there, or I went to Pune and I found it there. But in Bangalore, or I went to Mysore and I found it there, no. But in Bangalore, it was particularly frustrating for me because I had to live there for various reasons for long periods of time. I had a fellowship, I had funding, I had, sort of institutional responsibilities. Then I started teaching there. I had a job there. And, I had a home, and I just couldn't sort of abandon it.
Yeah.
I kept trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And it didn't for me at that time, for that reason, which I've described in the essay. But I, maybe if I went there now under very different circumstances, I don't know, to teach at a university or to, just live a retired life as a writer, maybe it would work very well. At least the climate is good.
Traffic is really bad.
The traffic is very bad, but the climate is good. You live there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
It wasn't so bad then. The traffic was not the issue then.
Pretty sure. It's been more of a recent phenomena, right?
Yeah.
This traffic thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's one more thing that I wanted to explore. There's this sort of architecture of time that you touch upon with different cities. Like for New York, it's more like city of the future. for Delhi, it's like city of the past. And with Kashi, you sort of like keep it outside time. Like you say it's Kashi Karvat, it's outside the realm of time. Future is turning into past, past is turning into future.
Yeah.
So, do you think time also made sort of these essays, like it played a very important element in all these essays?
Yeah.
And also, like, there would be a lot of cities where you visited them over periods of time, right? Like maybe New York, you visited after 9/11, and what sort of experience does that add when you're visiting after such a long time, or maybe quite a few times over the years? So those essays, when you read them right now, how do you see that? And do you think it might have changed your experience of how you felt at that time, and now maybe you look differently toward these places?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these are places that I have repeatedly been in. And
Right.
I mean, I started going to New York in the early 90s, and I was there almost every year, sometimes, for entire years, or for long periods until the pandemic. And actually, it's very strange, but I haven't been back after the pandemic. And that to me feels very, very, very strange, because it was, practically like a second home. I mean, I went at least once a year, if not more. And it's just, I mean, it was just as much a hub for my life as Delhi is. But after COVID, I haven't gone. And now, I mean, there are times when I really want to go. I just want to go and see Zoran Mamdani's New York. I want to go and go back into, my people and my places there. Although many things have kind of broken down, like Columbia campus, which was such a center for me. And many of the campuses, NYU and New School and so on, that where I have friends, where I would just constantly be hanging out, or giving talks, or just, being in and out of those buildings, those libraries. I'm a little afraid of how things have changed. Though, of course, my friends tell me, oh, at some level, things don't change, and life just goes on, and it always seems worse from a distance. But New York, I feel like that's one place I don't want to find out, how badly things have worked out, especially in the last year or two, I would say. But anyway, that apart, yes, time is central to my writing, and to my way of thinking, you could say, my way of understanding the world. I mean, partly I'm a historian, so I'm always thinking in terms of past times. I'm always struck by the presence of the past in our midst. It could be architectural, it could be in terms of social practices, like the caste system, for example, right. Or patriarchy, or certain kinds of religious life, or certain kinds of political structures, like imperialism. I mean, these are things which have a long history, right? And they have been with us for centuries. So there's that kind of scale of time. Right. But even in my own lifetime, there's a scale of time, because, like if you think back to my mother's family, I mean, they came to India in partition. So that's really quite recent.
Yeah.
And so if I go to Pakistan, or I go to, I went to Lahore only once. I would really love to go back there and travel around in the Punjab, where my folks are from.
Yeah.
I mean, these are memories that my mother and my aunts and other uncles and relatives have. It's not that they, that it's so far back that we can't even imagine it. And so that is, in a way, because things are present as memories in people who live and speak and think around you and feel. The past is a constant. I mean, Ashish Nandi.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to him, and now he's almost 90, and he often talks about, now more and more, I feel, his memories of Calcutta in the 1940s, during the famine, or during partition, and the violence of partition in Calcutta. And then his youth as a student in Nagpur. And this is a part of history.
Yeah.
But it's also him remembering, like, his mother's voice, and it's deeply personal, and I think of my own childhood in, South Extension, this part of Delhi that, we left when I was about 11 or 12. And then my parents, childhoods, and so on and so on, so there's a lot of, for me, it's a continual dipping in and out of past and present. I'm a little skeptical about the future because of the kind of, issues that we have with climate change and so on. I mean, things don't look very good in terms of the long-term survival of, our current civilization.
Yeah.
But I do feel that time is stamped on and interwoven into place.
Yeah.
I mean, time is the river, right?
Right.
in which you're swimming, and it's always in spate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like you mentioned in one of the poems your father also wrote, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned river, so
yeah,
I think he said डूबना तो तय है,
right.
इसलिए नाव नहीं, नदी पे भरोसा करना.
Yeah, that's a well-known line of his. Yeah.
Yeah.
In another poem somewhere he said, "Kis समय ऐसी नदी है जो सदा नीरा है," meaning it's always got water in it, the river of time, it never dries out.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah.
It's only we who fade away. Yeah.
Changing. Yeah.
So yeah, time is important. And some people have said, oh, the structure is very confusing because the essays are not chronologically arranged.
Yeah.
By when they were written, or when things happened, or how my life was going through that. It's not like a memoir, So.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the same essay, I'm going back and forth, in and out, now and then some other time. That's very prominent, I think, in the Banaras and the Bangalore essays.
Yes.
And so also with Delhi, really going back to like Khusro and Nizamuddin and long ago Delhi and partition Delhi, and then, our own Delhi. So yeah, that's kind of part of the journey, I think.
Yeah. Got it. So one of the last questions, I would want to know if there is some city that you wanted to include in this book, but you couldn't for some reason.
Well, yeah, actually, I mean, I ran out of time. The book had to, be finished and press and all this. But now I'm thinking more and more, actually, just in the last week, I've been thinking of so many places that I want to write about. I want to write about Kerala. I want to write about Kashmir. I want to write about, Pakistan. I want to write about, um, this city where I lived as a small child. And I've never visited as an adult, but I want to visit and then write Mexico City. Where I
you mentioned in the book as well.
Yeah, I spent like the first 4-5 years of my life there, and it was an important time for my parents and their marriage and their careers and so on. And I would love to sort of write about Mexico, this peculiar kind of origin point for me, from which I've had no subsequent contact, and I would love to write about Calcutta. I would love to write about Srinagar. I would love to write about Kochi. I would love to write about London and England. Actually, I've spent a lot of time living in England and traveling in England, in Oxford and Cambridge and so many other cities. So also been a place I've been going since my childhood for various reasons. So I think there's easily another book of essays, or something else. I've spent a lot of time in Dharamshala and in Ladakh,
interesting,
with Tibetan friends, and also something I've done a lot, like many years in a row. So I have again a sense of the history of it, and I've written about it, but in more social sciencey ways, not in not in a literary way. So that all remains to be written.
So we look forward to the next book.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem.
Yeah,
I have just one last question.
Yeah, please.
If you would want to recommend a book and a film to the people who would be hearing this podcast, what would those be?
You mean connected to travel, or
no, anything? Something that you would want to recommend, like something that you're reading currently, or you have read recently, or found interesting, and you just want to recommend.
Oh gosh, that's a
sorry to put you on the spot.
That's a tough one. Well, I'll just tell you some two recent things. I mean,
sure.
One is, I just read, like everybody else, Arundhati Roy's memoir, Mother Mary Comes to Me, about her mother, but not really about her mother, also about herself and her life, and her oeuvre and her adventures. And it's wonderful. It's just so interesting. It's so unexpected. It's so beautifully told and written, so masterfully, constructed. It has a lot of heart. It's I mean, if you admire her writing anyway, there's no problem there. But it's being personal, in a particular way, that takes a lot of courage, I think. Especially when you're talking about these very primary and very painful relationships, like with your parents, or with your siblings, or with your partners, or with your children, whatever it is. She's really sort of put herself out there. And for someone who has attracted relentless scrutiny, admiration, flack, to further sort of present her story in this way, I was kind of blown away by that. So a wonderful read. I would recommend it to everybody. And this film, I mean, I know this film quite intimately. Homebound, that just made it, almost made it to the Oscars. Neeraj Khewan's film, based on an article by my former husband, my partner, ex-partner, Basharat Peer. And, I was there we were together when that article was written and reported and published in the New York Times about these two migrant workers. And the way that Neeraj has made that into this beautiful, moving, real film. I mean, it's absolutely it's heartbreaking, but it's, the truth of it. The empathy with which it is both written and made into a film and acted. The fine performances by everybody in it. It's really, I just felt so much, so moved and so much pride that, that it's possible to be both very critical and very sensitive about, the very real political, socioeconomic, and cultural sorts of problems that plague contemporary India, and without sort of losing your humanity. I mean, I know that sounds very cliche, but at the heart of it, the empathy is the greatest strength of that story, and of the way in which it is constructed and told. But it's a beautiful, beautiful film, and I think everyone should watch it. I think it should have even gone to the Oscars. If it weren't for the kind of politics of the way Hollywood works. But it's also amazing and creditable that it got made, and that it's done well, and that it's been shown, and it's not been sort of subjected to the kind of censorship that other excellent films have been. So kudos and hats off,
I agree. Even I had the chance to watch it in the theaters, and it is such a well-made movie. It's not like it's so vulnerable. Everyone after the movie, I saw everyone, and they had tears in their eyes, and everyone felt that. And the theater was there was that somber feeling, which people, I think, after the pandemic, there was this collective amnesia where people sort of forgot what we went through as a country, but what humanity went through. So just to feel that in that visceral manner was really beautiful, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, we've all sort of blocked out, the horrors of that time. I mean, people who lost their loved ones probably will never forget, or people whose own health was, affected, whose livelihood was affected, are marked by it for life. But many of us have tried our best to kind of move on from it. But it, I think that film will stand the test of time. I think that's the important thing. And it will provide commentary, on our country for future generations. So that's that's something very creditable.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, Ananya, thank you. Just will end this podcast here.
Okay.
Would want you to read an excerpt from your book.
Okay. So this essay is about Chennai in one sense, but it's also tells the story of a campaign led by the singer, musician, writer T.M. Krishna, and the environmental journalist and activist Nityanand Jayaraman, Niti and Krishna, over several years, and it's still running in some form, where they try to sort of make classical art forms like Carnatic music available to all castes and classes of people, but they also try to provide a stage for and a public platform for non-elite art forms, and bring them into the mainstream of people's understanding of what the culture is of their city and their state and so on. So there's a festival that they ran on the beach, involving a fishing community and their village, to bring them into kind of direct confrontation with the elite, Tamil Brahmin coterie that normally controls access to Carnatic music, right? So this is happening in 2017, 18, something like this. That night, after the spontaneous party at Elayaman Koval Beach, where everyone danced, then helped clear out rows of plastic chairs and take down the lights and sets, the core group of Veera volunteers — Veera is the kind of festival of this kind of musical festival that they're having. The core group of the Veera volunteers repaired to Niti's house nearby in Besant Nagar, shared with his partner, urban studies sociologist Karen Coelho, for dinner. Saravanan, who is the kind of representative of the fisher folk in their community, and also the one who works closely with Niti and Krishna to get this festival going. Saravanan, giddy with the success of the Veera, which is entirely crowd-funded and free of corporate sponsorship or institutional support, clambered onto a divan next to Krishna and started to sing, the song Porambok, which was the kind of iconic viral song with a video that Krishna had released that year, where he was singing in this kind of industrial wasteland, and talking about what a certain kind of mining and oil rig, etc., were going to do to the coastline of Tamil Nadu, where fishing communities depend on the ecology of that coast remaining pristine in a certain sense. So Saravanan, the kind of village representative, he started to sing that song which Krishna had sung. Krishna looked at him in amazement. Saravanan was loud, off-key, and determined to carry on. After a point, he began to imitate Krishna's characteristically dramatic hand gestures, which you can see in the music video, with a bodily precision that was in inverse proportion to his ability to sing in tune. Krishna collapsed in laughter, as did the rest of us. But then the hilarity became camaraderie, as Krishna and Saravanan put their arms around one another and sang a duet. Both their voices, one mellifluous and trained to perfection, the other rough and earthy, were booming. Tamil is their common language, beloved to both. It struck me that Carnatic, a product as much of courtly Tanjavur as colonial Madras, is a music that draws its contours from the sea, exactly like the simple fishing songs known to Saravanan, his uncle Sundaramurthy, and their fellow villagers. Why do we associate Carnatic music's aesthetic properties exclusively with temples and kacheris, but not with the natural surroundings in which these man-made structures are set? We go out to sea with our nets and boats, Veronica told me. She's one of the young volunteers. And we come back with our catch of songs and stories. This was an old lyric she had gleaned from village elders, made her own, and taught to village children who will not grow up to practice their ancestral calling of being fishermen. Yeah. Veron can't sing to save her life, Krishna tells, rolling his eyes. She's one of those people who just can't be trained to sing. Veron grins at his despair, Chennai's most famous Carnatic music practitioner and a fabled teacher adored by his students who cannot get one good note out of her for all his virtuosity. But without Veron, perhaps the lyric repertoire of the Patinavars, that's the community, would be lost forever. As boats are mechanized and nets, sails, and oars given up, along with the music that for centuries softened and narrated the labor of fishing. Veronica Angel, that's her name, bright eyed, creative, and linguistically as gifted as she is challenged musically, is a key lieutenant for Niti and Krishna in the Veda's planning and execution each year. She is the self appointed archivist and bard of the Urur Olcott Kuppam, the village. She now translates for me not only the Kuppam's fishing songs and her own poems, but also the poetry of Tamil writer Perumal Murugan, which Krishna sings more and more often. Through her unique consciousness, her intuitive sensitivity to land and sea, to a people and their memories, I have come to enter worlds of poetry that move me beyond all the poems in all the languages I know, for I know no Tamil. So this last bit, the concluding part, an equal music. By song's end, by evening's end, Krishna and Saravanan were locked in an embrace, yelling at the top of their voices. They seemed, as indeed they were, like brothers, alike but different, separate but akin. I thought about their elective kinship, forged in a common cause. This is what Ambedkar would at first have called by its liberal name, fraternity, and later by the Buddhist Maitri, or Bandhuta, so lamentably lacking in India, especially in Hindu society, where caste does not permit such bonds to even be imagined, leave aside forged in real life. As Krishna and Saravanan embrace in Niti's house, three distinct agendas become intertwined. A project for cultural democracy, a project for cognitive justice, and a project to protect the commons. Parity of the arts, parity of knowledge systems, parity of resources. Together, these can make for a truly egalitarian vision of Indian society. I thought how it would be. I thought about how it would be to have such fraternal and friendly feelings writ large, an equality of lived spaces, a mutual respect between art forms, a level playing field for all communities, a universal beach. To quote the poet also from Chennai, Vivek Narayanan, also a good friend of mine. Caste is the breaking of primordial connections that thrum in our blood, across bodies, through the earth and astride the sky. Caste is abnormal, against the order of nature. Can we dream of such fellow feeling, such parity, such give and take? Can we begin to do this all the time, in all our activities? Disregard caste, turn our societal order into a Veda? Can we draw a line connecting everything that moves us to a social movement for the annihilation of caste? Can we truly and constantly celebrate oneness? I have learned so much from my friends, Krishna and Niti. I learned to keep walking north on the coast as Besan Nagar became Urur Olcott Kuppam, as Elliott's Beach became Elayaman Kovil Beach, as rough sand became green scrub, as property became Porumbok, as Margari became Veera, as Krishna's voice became Sarvanan's voice, both loud, as the stringed Tanpura became a fishing boat, as the self dissolved into empathy, as the tide came in and certainties were washed away, slip sliding from under the soles of my feet. Let the great deep take me, I say. There's no totem in the ocean and no taboo. The fishermen have an origin myth, not for themselves, but for the marine mammals closest to them. It goes like this. Dolphins, who can speak, want to leave the sea and live among humans. They petition Shiva. Shiva flung his ring into the turbulent waters. Find it for me, he said, and you can have your wish. They leap and dive again and again, in vain, ever in search of Shiva's ring. They sing.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ananya.
Well, thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you. And I hope we'll meet soon.
Yes.